The top questions that parents are asking, and since I'm a parent coach, I get asked a lot of questions. And so I'm going to answer a few of those on this show today. The first one was, how is it ADHD? Is it defiance? Like, how can I tell the difference? What's going on with my kid? So I love this question because a lot of times kids will start off with a diagnosis of ADHD. And then what happens is their behaviors happen and their brain is wired a certain way, and they get more and more negative and more resistant, and it looks like defiance. And by all definitions, perhaps I am really reluctant to label kids with defiance or oppositional defiance. If you think that every behavior is defiance, then that's going to really limit you in the tools that you have to use. I look at it as a whole thing of what's going on inside of their brain, how their brain is responding or reacting, and that has a lot to do with how they're coming across. Usually kids start to get more labels because they're butting heads with the adults around them. I've lately had kids as young as like 3, 4, 5 years old have an oppositional defiance diagnosis. And I'm not going to tell you that there's no such thing, but I'm going to tell you that this is telling us something, that defiance is a symptom of what's going on, and it's something that we can totally change. And so if you're feeling like, I can't tell you how many people have told me, like, this is the problem, like they're so defiant. They say no about everything. And when I ask, like, when did this start? It usually started when they were about 18 months old, or maybe a little bit older if they didn't talk right away. And so these kids are coming into this like with people that are believing that they're defiant, that something's wrong with them. And it's not something wrong with your kid. It's the way their brain is wired, and we have to work to change that wiring so that they can be more functional. I don't want you to be having battles with your defiant child. And I want you to know how to work around that. So it is part of ADHD. It's also part of, if your child has fetal alcohol or drug effect, that's going to show up like defiance, especially since one day they know something and the next day they don't. That's very common in kids that are drug effect, alcohol, affected in utero. Sometimes trauma looks like that. There are definitely times kids with trauma can be right on top of things, and there's other times when they're not. And so I think we have to do away with this, that they're just being defiant. I'm always like, why? Like, what's going on? What else? What's there? And in order to work with that, I really believe you have to have a different mindset about it. So that's how I look at dealing with defiance. And yes, sometimes it's very extreme, and kids that are super, what we would call defiant, you have to approach it differently, and that's okay. Like, we're not going to have our kids just stay there. And that's the thing that I worry the most about the labels that kids get, especially really, really young. If you're told from the time you're really young that, oh, you're just defiant, that's what you're going to be. Like, it's almost like giving permission to it. And I want to help you to work with that. And I know that it also comes from a place of frustration, like, oh, my kid is so defiant, and you're butting heads about everything, and nothing seems to be working. And that's an issue, right? Like, that's something that you need to get help with, because not everything should have to be such a big battle. The other question is the number 2 question is, what do I do if none of the consequences that I set up work? They don't work. Nothing works with this kid, which is part of the defiant thing, right? So First of all, that's because you're setting up consequences that aren't tied to what's happening at all. If you're having to think up consequences, it's probably not going to work with your kids that are wired differently. It may work with your neurotypical kids. It may work with your more kind of just want to get along kids. But it's over time, it kind of breaks down. So if something happens and then you have a consequence that isn't tied with it. For example, I've done videos on how many parents will just take the phone away for everything that happens. That's not the consequence that is going to solve anything like that. That's going to create some tension there. And parents do it because it's seems like the only thing that matters to them. So they are trying to find something that's going to matter to the kid, because sometimes when we have a consequence, it's because we are trying to change the way our child feels about what they did. And that doesn't have to be part of it at all. It doesn't matter how they feel about it. We're just going to be steady and consistent in what we are going to do. So they get to choose the action. They get to make that choice, and then we need to know what we're going to do about it. And that's also one of the places where I think parents really struggle, because if you don't know what to do, if you're at this place where you're like, everything I try, nothing works, they still have the same behaviors, they're still talking back, they still, are just as defiant, right? Then we're not really getting to what's going on in their brain, and we're not helping them to make those changes and adjustments, and we're kind of missing the mark. And usually it is because we want them to feel bad, or we want them to feel bad enough that they change, that they don't ever do that again. And that's not going to work with these kids. They don't care to a certain point, but they do care when it's directly related. So the way I set up consequences, most parents are like, well, what's the consequence? But it's part of it, right? Like if we have to wait to sit down and eat until you set the table, then we don't have to have an additional consequence because it took them so long to make that decision. We just be steady and wait and hold the line. And if they're just not going to eat, then we can make other decisions. But the consequence is built in the having to wait, in the us not budging. That's a boundary, right? I want to have you get better at setting up boundaries, and our kids to learn cause and effect when we cross boundaries. If we cross our boundary with law, with the laws of the land, there's going to be a consequence, and we don't get to decide what it is. It's just what naturally flows from it, even if we have a good excuse. And it doesn't really matter how I feel about it. I might be really upset that I got a ticket for speeding, but it doesn't. It can be neutral. Getting the ticket is just the effect of what we did. So I always encourage parents to set up what it is you're going to do, and without getting help on that, it's going to be really tricky, because you're going to want to go to, well, I'm going to have this punishment, I'm going to take money away, I'm going to, not let them go do something, I'm going to ground them, I'm going to take their phone away. So this is where you are going to need some help if you have this constant defiance and this constant the consequences don't work. It's not working going on in your home. Get some help, because this is something that isn't that hard to change, but it takes some guidance, because it has to change your mindset about it as well. So those are the two top questions that I'm going to answer today, and I hope that was helpful.